Welcome back to Let's Code. Today we're talking about splash screens and loading assets and what to display to a bevy game user or the player when those assets are loading. So this example runs pretty quickly, so I'll try to slow it down in the video, but understand that this runs in about a second or less. So the splash screen, so to speak, includes the name of the game in the bottom right. It starts off with a loading indicator, and then when the assets are loaded, it transitions into a press X to start. Now, there are a number of directions that I'm going to take this, but we'll cover that later. So think of this as a bare bones introduction to loading assets and responding to the loading states inside of a bevy application. So let's start off with the app state. We've got booting app, start screen, and error screen. So when the app starts, we're going to end up in the booting app state. When the assets are loaded, it'll transition us into the start screen. And then if anything goes wrong, it'll transition us into the error screen. The application is set up like this. I've got a clear color that puts a dark color on the background. I've set the window plugin to have a splash screen or the title of my game on the window. Both completely up to you, your choice. Don't really have an impact on loading. And then we start seeing the Bevy Asset Loader APIs. Now, I'm not using the IES Progress integration yet, so this is just going to be creating an asset collection, loading it, and then when that's loaded, transitioning to the success state, or if it fails, transitioning to the failure state. So we add the default state to our application. In this case, it's booting app. And we also add a loading state. So the loading state runs in booting app. When it's succeeded and it's loaded our assets, we move to start screen. If it fails, we continue to error screen, and we're using the My Assets collection, which in this case is just an image I got from Unsplash. You'll notice here that there's also an asset that doesn't exist. So if I save that and I run this again, we see press escape to quit instead of press X to start. So this is our Bevy Asset Loader API, and it's actually quite nice. So if this is all you need, then this is all you need. You can just have a loading state and a playing your game state. And when the app boots up, it'll be in the loading state, and when the assets are loaded, you can transition into the playing state. If that's all you need, just use that. But what I'm trying to do here is build up an example that will show a splash screen immediately, transition into a start screen when the assets that are necessary are loaded, and then allow me to transition into, say, the main menu of the game after that. So we've got a startup system that's set up boot screen, and this sets up the UI that we are going to show when we're loading. Setup boot screen sets up our camera 2D bundle because that includes a UI bundle for us as well. And we set up two text bundles, one that is the game in the bottom right. You'll note that we're using the asset server.load instead of Bevy Asset Loader at the moment, because when we use this in an actual game, Bevy Asset Loader can be used to load heavier weight assets. And when we show the loading screen, we want that to kind of show up as fast as possible. So we're using the default Bevy mechanic for loading in some random font file so that we can show something faster rather than waiting for all of our assets to load. And we do the same. So this is the loading indicator that you would see if the loading was slow, let's say. And most importantly, we have this little start text component on it. So start text is a unit component or unit struct component. To be even more clear, a unit struct that we've derived component for so that we can add it to the entity that has the text bundle on it. So when our app boots up, we set up the boot screen by setting the text in the middle of the screen and the text in the bottom right of the screen. Then we can add a system stat to run in the update phase of the booting app state, which is a mouthful. So basically it means that when we're in booting app and our systems are running normally, we want to run this system normally. So this is timeout on slow load. So if the load takes more than 10 seconds, if the app boots up and then Bevy Asset Loader for some reason doesn't change state inside of 10 seconds, then we panic, and panic will send us to the failure state as well. When our assets are fully loaded, we will enter the start screen state. So we can add another system set so that when we enter that start screen state, we run setup press to start. And setup press to start is responsible for querying for the start text and just updating it to say press X to start. One of the things I want to do here is integrate with Leafwing, so that we get not just press X to start, but maybe press Enter or X, depending on whether you have a controller or a keyboard or something like that connected. So we've set up our loading screen, we've updated our loading screen when the assets are successfully loaded. We also have to set up the on-enter systems for when we enter the error screen. In this case, this is the press escape to quit system, which is the same thing as the system we just looked at with different text. So if we go into the error state, the press escape to quit system updates the text, that is the start text, with press escape to quit. The way we can press escape to quit is by using a built-in bevy system from bevy window close on escape. So we add another system set in the update phase of the error screen. So this is when we're in the error screen state and systems are running normally. We want to run this system alongside every other normally running system. And this will allow us to just press escape and it will close the application. So overall, it feels like there's a lot going on here. But basically, recap is that we have 3 states. These states are controlled by Bevy Asset Loader. So we start off in booting app when we boot the app up. Bevy Asset Loader will transition us into the start screen state if we are successful, or the error screen state if we fail. And this allows us to modify what's on the screen based on what state we're in. Now, there are a number of things that I want to do here. Like we talked about before, I want to integrate with Leafwing. I want the press X to start to say something along the lines of press enter or press X, or whatever the right key is for the controller input that you're using, or at least the one that we think that you're using. I also want to integrate with IES progress, which is another crate that will let us show the progress of the loading of the assets. So instead of just directly transitioning to the success state, while we are booting, we can say loading N%, which gives a little bit more user feedback. And then the other thing I want to do is actually get in some assets like you would see in a loading screen, right? Like we're using Bevy Asset Loader for what we're considering the heavy game assets right now, right? So we've got this struct, it defines a set of assets. All of these assets have to load before we can transition into the success state. But we probably also have things like the game logo that we can load a lot faster if we split it into a second asset, or if we use the asset server. And that's why I have this minimal splash screen assets commented out here, because I do want to do something a little bit more complicated. I want to use Bevy Asset Loader to load in the absolute minimum set of, say, logos and things like that, and then fade those in on the loading screen to produce a nicer looking effect for the start screen. So what will end up happening is that we will have the app start with some color in the background. We'll load in, say, the game logo, whatever our game is named. It'll look awesome and whatever. It'll be some JPEG or PNG or something like that. That will fade in when that loads, while we still load the heavier assets. And when the heavier assets are loaded in, that's when press X to start or whatever will show up. And then once we do press X to start, we do also need to transition into a game playing state or some other state of the game. So that's a little bit of what I'm working on with splash screens. It's not quite finished yet. So when we get to a point that I'm happy with, I will upload the code. And in the meantime, have a great day.